everyone. We're back for another episode of the Geopolitical View. And I'm your guest, Quanda Francis. Today's guest is Olayemi Olurin. So just to give you some background on her, I think you're amazing, by the way.
Thank you.
She's a movement lawyer and political commentator, writer, and abolitionist thinker. And I have so many questions for you, so we're going to just jump right in.
All right.
Can you tell us about your background and how you became a movement lawyer and an abolitionist thinker?
Yes. Okay. So I am originally from the Bahamas, Nassau, the Bahamas, and I moved to America because I wanted to be an attorney. So that was always the plan. I came here for school because I thought it would be more beneficial if I entered the U.S. education system earlier. And I became a public defender initially because I was in college. I thought I would be a divorce attorney. I was like, ooh, that seems spicy, being people's business jokes. You know what I mean? Yeah, but I was doing all my research, all my academics, everything on the criminal system being racist and on the prison industrial complex. And I was writing my thesis called Colored Bodies Matter, the relationship between our bodies and power. And it was the same time as the Ferguson protests. And I remember my thesis advisor, a wonderful white lady named Dr. Kathleen Sullivan, called me a gap scholar, which she meant affectionately, but it's somebody in academia who points out problems. They don't necessarily have solutions or work towards it or do anything, but you need that person to point out problems. But I remember saying it is insufficient for me to be a Black person and go into a legal profession where we are so overrepresented in terms of the criminal system, but underrepresented in terms of representation, and not do something that directly serves my community. So that was why I've become a public defender. And then as far as being a movement lawyer and expanding beyond that, I think advocacy is necessary beyond the court. I think people think that when you're a public defender, you work in public interest work, that you think you're doing God's work, and that's not true. I think in actuality, you realize that you're a harm reductionist at most. At the most I can do in court is contend with the laws, the situations, the things as they are, and try to make the best of that situation for my clients. But they're already between a rock and a hard place. So if I want my clients and the people that I represent to be not between a rock and a hard place, I have to go out and change the opinions and the minds of everybody else that's voting and demanding and co-signing and endorsing this world that we're in that's harming these people. So that's how I decided, I got to be a movement lawyer. I'm going to be miserable.
Well, listen, the movement is happy to have you, which leads to my next question, right? How do you see the abolitionist movement working in coalition with other movements? Yes. And organizations to address systemic racism and economic inequality in the criminal justice system?
I think when people hear abolition, they assume that you're sitting in political theory land, and they see hashtag abolition now, close jails now, and they think that your entire school of philosophy is close. I don't want anything other than you to close all the jails right now and close all the courts. And I do in theory, in my heart, but in real life, I recognize that that's a process. Abolition is a vision of tomorrow, a vision of the future, and it's about divesting from the prisons bit by bit, divesting from this prison industrial complex, so that we don't rely on it, so that we don't need this. So for me, how abolition plays into all these movements is I'm somebody who's, till I'm blue in the face, bill reform, I'm talking about bill reform everywhere else and all these different reform initiatives that are meant to get us there. So these different step-by-step processes that divest from the system, but also help our clients and help the Black and brown people and the poor people in this system escape some of these brutal results and collateral consequences of our prison industrial complex. So that's how I think abolition is working in conjunction with bail reform, with all the reform movements that are meant to divest and move us towards it.
Okay, great response. It's good because, a lot of people, they just hear defund, and defund the police. And it has so many definitions to so many different people. So it's great that you sort of outline how sort of all of the coalitions can work together, which leads me to another question about your experience representing individuals that cannot afford legal representation, and how does that inform your work as a movement lawyer?
I think so. When you decide you want to go work in public interest, or when you decide you want to go be a public defender or a movement lawyer, a civil rights attorney, or whatever, really gets you amped up when you're in school, you're reading, you're learning these things. And I think you actually think it's not as bad as you think it is. When you decide to do that work, I think you think it's a lot more insidious. When I was in school, I thought I would need a magnifying glass to parse this out, like how the system is operating. Like, oh, get me some statistics. You think you need the statistics to see, oh no, they're punishing Black people more, and white people want, no. You go into a courtroom. And it's clear. And there's a story I tell very often because I really think it really illustrates it in a nutshell. I very rarely do I ever represent any white people in general. Very rarely are they in the system, and when they are, the case is gone pretty quickly. But at arraignments once, so same judges, is back to back my files. I arraigned a black guy who was accused of smoking a blunt somewhere. This was before weed was legalized in New York City. So this is like 2018. I arraigned a black guy who is accused of smoking a blunt. They asked for thousands of dollars bail on him. Like, right? Thousands of dollars. Immediately that happens. Next guy, white guy I'm arraigning, is found with a bag of drugs. Obviously, you know what I mean? There would be intent to sell if he were a black person. All right, they would be making a drug dealer accusation. But anyway, found with a bag of drugs. They consent to his release. Immediate consent to his release. And that right there for me is the reality. When you work in this, when you represent the people that are criminal system, there's no way to not know the truth. There's no way to not notice, hey, everybody, I'm a public defender. I'm a constitutionally mandated attorney to represent destitute people, to represent people who are deathly poor. And I do say poor because I consider myself poor before like last year. Like I'm just now escaping what I would consider, I'm poor. Like I would not qualify. Big, and they would tell you don't qualify for your services. You get arrested, we got to go pay for a lawyer. Yeah. So you have to understand that. So if everybody in the criminal system, everybody I'm representing are underneath the poverty line, and I realize I look around and everybody in the court, everybody is represented by a public defender, that tells me who's there in the first place. I think enough of you seeing, okay, well, the only people being criminalized, the only people being turned in and out of this court for what are things that don't need to be dealt with this way are poor Black and brown people. And you just can't ignore that reality.
Yeah, I totally agree, because when I decided to work for the police department, right, I'm on the other side of that. I'm like, I'm in there. I'm like, I'm going to go in here as a researcher and show you a different way of looking at these cases. And you realize that, like, wow, bias is built into the system.
Yes.
Right? Bias is built into the databases, the tools that are used.
The procedure.
I hear some of the city council members sort of talking about the databases, and I'm like, I don't think they have a clue what these capabilities are, right? Yeah. Something as simple as like, you know what, if you're arrested and someone offers you water, just say no thank you. Now, because they have your DNA, right? Yeah. So it's like these things, these nuances, right? Or like a sealed record, like a sealed record, there's really no such thing. When we talk
there is no such thing. There is no such thing.
About the link analysis system, it's there's no such thing.
Absolutely.
Someone like me with my capabilities, like, being on the intel side, that can be very, very scary, right?
Yeah.
For other sort of researchers and analysts that work there that didn't have my capabilities, it's like, okay, all right, they can't really do much with the system because they don't understand it. But the data for me is different. And I'm like, wow, this bias is built into everything. Precision policing is actually extremely biased. And it's just the deck is stacked against, different individuals based on the areas that they live in. If you're on the side, it's about, they'll downgrade a crime quick.
Immediately. It's a different world. You see it clearly, like even from moving from, I lived on the border of Ridgewood and Bushwick for years. And even just moving from there to Flatbush, where everybody is Black and Caribbean strictly, and watching, I see NYPD everywhere. There's NYPD, and there's nothing dangerous about this neighborhood. There's no crime. I walk this neighborhood the wee hours of the night. Okay, I will jump out at 3 a.m. I need to go walk to the smoke shop. This is not a dangerous neighborhood, and you never see the police here helping people, talking to people. No. You just see them watching you, just on every corner, in front of everything, just making a hard time, harassing the kids that come out the subway, and you're like, oh, okay. It's hard to not know that, versus if you go visit your white friend somewhere in Manhattan, you never see NYPD. Actually, I think is a beautiful example. The other day, I go on a 5-mile walk every day. So the other day I was walking. I like to just choose a different direction, walk straight, walk into a new world.
Okay.
And if you just walk straight down, you just keep walking for 30, 40 minutes, it'll just become a whole new neighborhood, a nice little white Jewish community, and you will not see NYPD. You won't even see the same kind of stores. You won't even see the same kind of anything. The entire neighborhood and infrastructure, different. You
don't see them. They're there, right? Because there's a difference.
Because they're there for a different reason.
Guys, right?
They're there for a different reason. Yes, absolutely. Exactly. They're there for a different reason. The way that they're interacting with the community is different. They are there for them. They're there for them. They didn't want us.
Yes. Like, you don't know I'm there, but I'm there and I'm looking, right? And so, it's a very interesting dynamic, but, I've seen it, sort of, working in Manhattan South. And I'm like, okay, wow. Because again, I grew up in Brownsville, Bed-Stuy. So, my interactions, my lived experiences, and then again, just going from being a teenage mom, homeless, pregnant, and having to leave high school. It's just,
Okwanda, I need to interview you. It's your story I need to know. I say, Okwanda, I need to interview you. It's your story I need to know.
So
I gotta bring you a tea time with Olay. You gotta hear this.
Yeah. So it's like to now get to again, 20 years later, where it's like, my life is very different, but those lived experiences are still there. And I tried to bring that to the police department. And it's very interesting because again, even going in that environment, it's like I had to sue the entire department. I'm like, you were kidding me. I did not beat all of this to get here to have you tell me, oh, we're not going to promote you because you're a woman and you're Black. Really? Or we have other intentions for you because you're beautiful. Like, we're not doing that.
They will get you on that. They will get you on that too.
Yes, I did the ultimate boys month. I'm like, okay, so the politicians, this is going on. I said, okay. I resigned, sued the city, and ran for mayor. And that's how this started.
Did you feel, well, now I know you're supposed to be interviewing me, but now I have to ask because now I'm particularly curious because very often people talk to me about that level of like your beauty being a role and a factor in your career and how these people perceive you and all this. And I'm like, it's interesting, right? Because as a Black woman, I've always looked like this, right? And in different spaces, depending on what the space is, what their biases are, what their prejudices, everybody hasn't always been like, ooh, she's so beautiful, that dark African girl and whatever it is. But now it's a thing. You get to a place in your career, suddenly I felt like in the legal profession, working in this work, suddenly it was like, oh, you cute, and that's a problem. Like, so I'm like, when did you feel like that was always a thing, or only in particular spaces? How have you navigated that?
I think it was always a thing. But it became more of a thing when I went into professions that were dominated by men. Yes. Right. So, and when we talk about, because when I say, oh, I'm a scientist, they're like, a scientist, right? Yeah. Chief, okay, accountant, data scientist, wait. None of these things
are what they is.
So I don't fit that preconceived notion of what a scientist should look like, right? But I do sort of, when I talk about my lived experiences, there is certain things that people are expecting from me. And when they don't get that, it's just like, they're just all around confused. Yeah. Like, I don't know what she is, who she is. I don't know what this is. So let's just watch her. Yeah. And it's been sort of a lot of that. But when you talk about the context of beauty, it's still the same. The men are still who they are. Like when I see you talk about your breasts, because I got a breast reduction. I know this is late, right?
I'm working on it this year. I'm trying. It's such a process. I'm working on it.
They used to be huge. So like people would talk to, this before, so I got a reduction. Yeah. And it was less of that, but still it was because we didn't reduce them small enough. But, but that's a whole different topic when we talk about, because like, again, there's beauty. And then there's the entire package.
Beauty, and then there's hypersexualization, depending on what your body type is. There's a whole lot. Yeah, like as a Black woman, it becomes a lot of different things. I tell people it's a lot of competing things.
It's so much. So I sort of just go with it, and I've weaponized it to my advantage.
Yeah.
Because that's what we should do, because we're strong. Right? Yeah. Right? So I size up the person that I'm dealing with, and I determine, what part of me are you going to be most interested in? And then we proceed from there, because I have a goal. I have an agenda. Yeah. So, but, that's how you have to do. Society is doing the same thing. So, sort of, go through the process, but we do what we need to. But which brings me into, we covered a lot in that.
Good. I love this.
Yes. But, since we are talking about sort of the idea of what a lawyer should look like, right? Yeah. How do you address the preconceived notions of what a lawyer should look like in your role as a movement lawyer and a political commentator?
So I think this is something we can just look at based on our constantly changing world, right? Like there are things, I actually saw this like on Twitter yesterday. Remember when Rihanna first wore that Swarovski crystals dress naked and they were freaking out? Remember everybody in big new. Now we're like, if that happened today, Bad not. You see outfits like that all the time. There's nothing right. There's something to normalizing, to just, to just existing. Like, you'll take the flack up front, but people will get accustomed. And I say that to say, like, 3 years ago when I first even got on Twitter and stuff like that, and it was more of a conundrum, a conversation around my aesthetic. And I addressed it like, oh yeah. Like, people do that. They hypersexual, like, but I'm an attorney anyway. This is what it is. And because I have presented that and they know that, I don't hear it as much. People become accustomed. They become used to it, right? Like, I'll wear whatever I want this weekend and still be talking about serious matters, the next day or whatever it is. So I think there's something to me as recognizing that I'm going to make it. We know as Black people that we're multidimensional. We know that intelligence and attractiveness are not mutually exclusive. We know that we are already subject to far more scrutiny. I'm going to be hypersexualized regardless. It doesn't matter what I put on, just the body type I have.
Yeah,
they're going to hypersexualize it. And it's not my obligation to see me in the way that they see me and to politicize my own body and my own self. But I recognize that if I take the flack, I do it, and I just continue to exist, not only will they get used to it and I'm not going to hear it so much anymore, other Black women are not going to hear it as much anymore.
Yes.
So for me, that's what it is. It's like, you know what? I don't even care what y'all talking about. So let me just continue to exist, because some other Black girls, some other Black women who might have cared, who might have felt that, that pressure, that insecurity, and all these different things of being scrutinized, they're going to feel like, oh my God, Olayemi, you see her nails, you see her hair, you see her, she's there. And they do, and they tell me that. So I'm like, that's how, for me, it's like, let me make it easier for us, because I know what the experience is of people making you feel like there's only one way to be, especially as a Black woman. They make you feel like you could only be they could only be Claire Huxtable or Olivia Pope. And that's it. That's their only, these very just prim proper one kind of way. And I'm just like, I don't have it in me. I don't have a multidimensional.
I'm not even sure that exists though.
I don't think it exists. I don't think it exists.
It doesn't, because I look at that and I'm like, okay, like, and this is, and I want to just jump back into what you said about like young women, girls are watching you. Like, my daughter's 19 and she's like, wow, you're interviewing her, and she's a lawyer. Then she went to research on you, but she's 19 and she's already a senior in college, headed into medical school.
Yeah.
Right? And she was her hair natural, right? So she's already sort of starting to deal with that nuance of what people believe she should be and who she should be, and not necessarily in my shadow, because she's like, this is my life and I don't want, whatever you're doing is what you're doing, but I like my privacy. But it's still like good for her to see that it's okay for you to push into these spaces and be your most authentic self.
My sister doing is she is a doctor. So I need to put her in contact with Duan so she can get the medical equivalent of me. She can feel what feel for me.
That's amazing. I'm gonna hold you to that. Because she's amazing and she's smart, and then she's young and she's going like she's a senior in college. So at 19. So this is, she's amazing, and I like the fact that she's okay with being her most authentic self. Yeah, but sometimes it's comfortable. It's uncomfortable, and isolating.
They don't teach us to lean into that. They actually, and they don't, and not just for a personal, like, obviously personal happiness, personal authenticity, but also there's a career and a skill set to be made in you. There are a lot of qualities that, especially as Black women, as Black people, they try to stamp out of us, but that is the marketable quality. I tell people all the time, like, people laugh when I say I'm a professional loudmouth, but I'm like, no, I have the gift of gab. Like, all my versions of my career is running my mouth. And I just think about people, like, if I'd listened as a kid, people trying to tell you you're too opinionated as a girl, or you shouldn't talk as much, or you should be quiet, or you should be. I'm like, y'all would have had me broke. Like
speak.
Right, out there trying to give me an insecurity and an inferiority complex out of a career. So that's also something people need to recognize. Like, a lot of these skills and these qualities that they try to stamp out of you, or what they, what they define professionalism to be, which is usually pretty just anti-Black in general and just a conformity to whiteness. All these different things are just moving you away from all the different things in yourself you could be harnessing and honing and doing something with. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I believe that. Which leads me to my next. Since while we're on the subject of balance, right? I want you to sort of explain to people, how will you balance your role as a movement lawyer and a political commentator, right?
Yeah.
Because it's
a lot.
I feel like it's related, but it's a lot.
Yeah.
And young women, and women in particular, are looking for ways to sort of balance, their lives, but also be able to hone into all of those skills and just,
it's a lot of it's a lot of thinking. I'm like just thinking about life's issues and the things and response. And I'll say, I'm at a better place in terms of dealing with it and balance and all the different collateral things that comes with, I think, what is a public figuredom that comes with that kind of thing if you're doing it and it's working. I'll say I read a lot from other Black. I try to remind myself, and Audre Lorde said this, that there are no new pains. There's nothing, like, you'll feel so upset when you're in this kind of work or you're doing these kinds of things. It's not the same as being an influencer. They don't like your clothes, so they a little bit, or something petty. No. People don't like me. They are mad. This is about racism and police and these kinds of things. And that can be a lot. The way racism in general is weaponized, and misogyny, the things that people say about you, the things they think about you, how they try to bring you down and make you feel. And that feels personal because you are going through it. It's happening to you. But something I have to remind myself of is not about me. And one, there are no new pains. So I'll read from Audre Lorde. I'll read from these other people and remind myself, girl, you're not special. You're not the first person in this conversation. You're not saying nothing that other people haven't said before. You're not experiencing something that people haven't experienced before. In fact, your experience has been better. I try to remind myself, I'm a girl who reads from Huey Newton. I read from all these people. I read from people who were killed, who were political prisoners, So for me, I'm like, you are alive, running your mouth on mainstream news, kicking with your cat, doing little wholesome things. Like, ultimately, you are pretty blessed. And I think that's something I remind myself of, that there's a blessing, there's a privilege in being able to talk and being able to advocate and being able to do these things. So I try to remind myself of that, to keep myself grounded and to not take it as this personal thing I'm stowing on. But importantly, I give myself grace. Like, I'm a person. I'm going to be upset. Don't talk about me. There are a lot of things there are a lot of things to balance. You're going to feel overwhelmed. You're going to feel exhausted. And I lean on my friends, like my therapist too. I lean on my therapist, but I very much so my friends, like my friends are a strong support system for me. And I complain till I'm blue in the face. From I wake up, from I open my eyes, I'm texting my friend like, you see this? I'm calling my friend. Like, my friends are constantly there. And I think that's something we go into the world of teaching. Where I think we tend to talk to law students, talk to people, talk to everybody, and frame things in this way that's like, you're supposed to find some route that makes you happy and content, and you don't have these problems, or you're not upset. That just doesn't exist. No, I think it's more, it don't exist. I think you go into it like, oh no, I'm gonna complain. Life is like that. I'm gonna have issues. I'm gonna have things, and I just have to allow myself to be a person that doesn't. I'm not gonna take everything on the chin, and not everything I'm gonna see and be like, whatever. Some things I'm gonna have to stomp about in my house. I think it's about giving yourself grace, leaning on your friends, and also just trying to remember, like, I'm a person, I can't do it all. I'm trying to do my part. I'm trying to, in this divesting vision, I'm trying to do my part to move us there. I can't do everything. It isn't, I'm not some special God and all be all. I'm just here, one person, trying my best to navigate it and lean on my friends and people, and try to also lean on personal understanding. Because I think if you know you and you like you, that changes it, right? Because if you don't like you and everyone's trying to tell you to do something different, which they are going to do, that's different, because you are kind of not convinced either. But I like me. So when people are like, oh, she's doing this, she's doing that, I'm like, I like it though. I would like it if it was on somebody else. So I like it on me. So that's it.
Okay, so this is a follow-up question. So who do you contribute that to, like that confidence? Was it how you were raised? Your mother? You talk a lot about your mom and your dad.
So a couple of people. One, my big sister, I always Bim. So Bim is, I appreciate so much that my big sister was vain early in life. Oh my God, that's the best thing that ever happened to me, because I have 3 sisters, and we all look exactly alike. We all look like little Pokemon variations of the same person. And Bim thinks she is the most beautiful thing walking. Now, my oldest sister. So when I was a kid, if you would say something, you'd be like, oh, I'm not pretty, or I'm not whatever. You say something negative about yourself, she is personally offended. She's going to fight you. Not having that. So Bim was always kind of in the house like, you know what? No, y'all are beautiful. Don't mind what everybody else, the outside world, they don't know that you're not in style yet. She was always, my big sister was always hip to the fact that beauty perception and all these different things and all these different competing colorism, where you're from, all these different things lend to whether or not people are even perceiving you, whether or not they're noticing that you are dynamic or you're beautiful, you're all these things. So it was always like, they don't know it, but that's true. So it was always in my house like, people, the rest of the world, because even growing up in the Bahamas, even before I came to America, the Bahamas is very anti-foreign. And even though I'm born and raised in the Bahamas, my Bahamian. My whole mummy family is Bahamian, but my daddy is Nigerian, my name is Nigerian, and I'm dark versus my mother is light. So, you know, you would get a lot of they just ignored you. They didn't check for you. They bullied you. They this. But my big sister was, and I was like, they don't know it yet. But you pop it. And my mommy was always in the house like, colorism is stupid. That is stupid. That is their inferiority complex. That was their mentality. So I was always going out into the world like, Lord, look at them, man. They don't even know no better. They don't know that I am top tier. So I always, it was kind of that. And my Grammy, like, and rest in peace to my Grams. But I feel like she knew me better than I knew myself before I did. Like, I feel like as an adult, I realized this, like, in like the last however many years. My Grammy always used to tell me, like, don't let other people's opinions, their words become your reality. And I think she knew from I was born that I was somebody who hates to be mischaracterized. And I will unwrap, like, I hate anything, even if it's not bad. If you call me a cat person, I'm like, but I'm not though. I'm a dog person. I just have a cat. I'd be like, you don't know about me. Stop talking about me. And I something now, I look back and I wish I could tell her like how much I appreciate that. Cause I'm like, I didn't know I would end up having a life or a career that would necessitate this advice, that I would need to look back on this in a different kind of scrutiny and realize, hey, there's something in me that's making me respond to this in a way that's not healthy and conducive to me. So that's something I would say my Grammy, my mom, and my big sister really gave me some foundational nuggets that have really done something for me in survival.
Okay. That's amazing. And that's some good advice for parents that are out there that are looking, that want to know, like, how do you raise strong, confident young women and young men, right? That was great advice, which we're going to shift a little bit to local politics in New York. So, what's your opinion of Eric Adams and how he's handled the significant challenges facing our city, including crime, policing, and the homelessness?
Everybody knows I am not a fan of Eric Adams. I am not a fan. All right. How do I say what are my opinions on this? I think Eric Adams is a cop, and I think he is a cop every second of every day, and he makes that clear that is, you know, that is his focus and that's his priority, and that's who he's looking out for. And I think there's something to that, right? When you have, that's the interest group he most supports, and he looks out for their needs. He makes sure they don't get the budget. Not only did he made budget cuts in so many other vital places, right? But he didn't. He gave them $90 million more. And if you've seen, it recently came out in the last couple of days, they're on track to like spend $820 million more than they were supposed to in overtime. So you have that between NYPD getting like $11 billion. We get cuts everywhere else. You have Rikers continuing to get $860 million every year, and him doing everything he can to prevent decarceration at Rikers, to resist closing Rikers, to attack the homeless people when it comes to whether it be him tearing up the encampments, him adding 1,000 more NYPD officers to the subway, him stripping them from the subways, and now him trying to forcibly hospitalize and detain them. It's just a string. I honestly, and I'm not even exaggerating, I literally could do a thread, I could just nonstop talk about all the different qualms and issues I have with Eric Adams. And my main gripe with Eric Adams is he doesn't do anything helpful for anybody. It's not even just that, you know, me, the more, you know, if you want to consider me the radical left, it's not just me who's not happy. Your approval ratings are very low. All the problems that you claim, all this over policing, over incarceration, every issue that he addressed when he came into office as being bad or being systemically out of control, because he said that himself about Rikers and about these different issues, have become worse under him. He thought, it was out of control under de Blasio when there were 16 deaths, but there are 19 deaths this year, and he's already, what did he do? When the NYPD officers, when the corrections officers, there were 3 deaths back to back in a week at Rikers. He goes to Rikers to offer his support to the corrections officers, not their families. When he's found to be continuing to put people in solitary confinement, despite the fact that we said that's not supposed to happen anymore, he goes and he responds, oh, no, that's restrictive housing, not solitary confinement. When they're obligated to report deaths, in custody deaths, to the Department of Justice so that an investigation can be begun immediately, he does it. He didn't report it. And then when he gets caught that it's a cover up, he goes, my understanding is that the place of death, he said, the place of death is a place where they died. The man just makes it's just endless complaints. I have endless criticisms for how it's being run. And importantly, I feel like what's an important note is so did the Democrats, so did the other people that he is supposed to be leaning on for political capital. And Kat Hochul is experiencing the same thing. It's harming them. There's a reason why that kind of rhetoric, not only is it's not helpful, it's not doing anything in terms of addressing the issues. It's not doing anything in terms of voter confidence, because again, ratings are low. But also we just had a midterm election where there was supposedly going to be a red wave all around the country, but there was nowhere that except here where we have a mayor constantly leaning into all these, right-wing, tough on crime, fear-mongering talking points. It is an understated problem for me that we're not talking enough about the fact that Lee Zeldin, a right-wing, a just completely right-wing, far-right candidate, is able to invoke our Democrat mayor's own rhetoric on his campaign trail. That is a problem to me. That really encompasses what Eric Adams is and all my issues with him. So that's my long stream of consciousness for why I don't like Eric Adams.
Okay. So I have a question for you about bail reform while we're sort of on that, right? Yeah. How does the debate about bail reform in New York compare to similar debates in other states?
I would say so.
There's lots of fear mongering, right?
Incredible.
As a researcher, I've looked at the data, so I'm like, this is okay,
the data, bail reform, the data is beautiful. That's the thing. The data is great, and it's consistent. Anybody who has to acknowledge the data acknowledges that. It's hard to.
But those are good people, because there are people behind the data. I can make data say whatever I need it to by just removing parts of the data set. Yeah. And I can tell a great story. So the people behind the data are working very hard to make sure it's accurate.
Yeah, child. even though the department's doing their best to make sure we don't see it as much.
No. Look at this guy. He has 40 petty larcenies.
Yes, I would say this is the thing that I would say. And I think is an important note. In New Jersey passed bail reform, forget bail reform, completely abolished their cash bail system in 2014 under Republican Governor Christie. You ain't hear a peep. You didn't hear a peep. We didn't hear it exactly. But in places,
that's why I'm asking you that question.
Right. But in places like New York City, where our racial demographics of Rikers in these places are very different and majority Black and brown, you hear hysteria. And that's what you get even with Chicago going into the Pretrial Fairness Act, right? A lot of dog whistling, some louder and clearer than others, right? About who it is that's going to be out. And that's really what it is. But I'd say New York, when people analyze it, whether it be how we ended up with the mayor we have, or how we analyze how bail reform has gone, the consideration of the pandemic isn't taken enough into it. So I'd say this. In New York, bail reform, we got this landmark bail reform started January 2020. Right. So January 2020, and then immediately shortly after lockdown, pandemic. Right. So we're not thinking, pandemic. We didn't get a lot of raise the age.
They both went into effect.
Yeah, both went into effect. But then immediately shortly after is the lockdown. So we didn't get we weren't focusing on it. All the news, all the everything, everybody is panicking about all the rhetoric was about the lockdown and about the pandemic and blah, 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 blah. So people weren't and by people, I mean advocates and all these, were not as on their P's and Q's to defend, a concerted media campaign against it, because there wasn't quite initially. What happened was we got bail reform in January. And then when the lockdown happened, they had an emergency session to pass an emergency COVID relief bill, and Cuomo smashed some rollbacks into that. So what happened was, and that is what put us at a disadvantage, right? We didn't have with Chicago's Pretrial Fairness Act, they had the benefit of one. We already saw how it went down in New York and the certain kind of the fear mongering. So people are prepared for it, advocates and organizers and stuff. But also they had, to their advantage, they started their opponents, the adversaries of bail reform, started a large campaign with the purge law and all that. And while it was a concerted, strong effort, and you wouldn't look at that as a benefit to us, I do see it as that, because it happened before. So you knew it was happening. The minute the purge law, the minute I seen it, I could debunk it immediately. I didn't get that benefit with bail reform. We didn't get that. It was like, oh, bail reform is good. It's good. No, it's completed. Pandemic. And then they were like, rollback. You know what I mean? But it happened, the rollback happened because it was, you know what I'm saying? So we were already working from a place of we were already down, right? So that was a lot harder for us, and having to fight and defend it after, when the media and all these different things aren't necessarily caring about it, especially in conjunction with the pandemic and fear-mongering about crime, poverty, and all these different things. So we were at a disadvantage, but I think that has helped us. I think, one, we know now, so it's allowed us to, we're doing better. I think bringing out the information, debunking it, coming after, like politicians that continue to fearmonger and do these things. But I also think it helped us better be able to defend it other places. Chicago, I think, is having a better run of the Pretrial Fairness Act and all these different things, even though they are obviously receiving a lot of pushback, and they're currently held up right now with them making some silly challenge on the law that probably is not going to go anywhere. But nonetheless, I think it was a learning process, and it's still, despite the rollbacks and despite what they're trying to do, it's still ultimately incredibly successful and powerful. And I think something we don't take into consideration enough is, you know when something is going wrong. Like, when Rikers is a crisis because there are more deaths, right? But you can't see the deaths you prevent when you get, bail reform. Like, oh, you don't know all the different people who have, if we didn't get bail reform, they would have ended up incarcerated and they would have died. You don't know that. So it's hard to really, feel the appreciation and the weight of how successful something was. But, a perfect example I think of today is, I was just posting yesterday about Layleen Polanco, who was a 27-year-old trans woman who died in Rikers in 2019 after she was held in solitary confinement for days. She had a seizure and they did not help her. And she was there on $500 bail. $500 bail for some misdemeanor foolishness. That present day, because of bail reform, she wouldn't be in Rikers. You see what I'm saying? So that woman, that would be somebody whose life would not be lost, because of that. So that's something to consider. I would say, yeah, we were at a disadvantage, but we're shaking now. We got it now.
Good. So I have a follow-up question to that. Yeah. So what do you think about sentencing, right? Because I see, as a researcher, this sort of domino effect, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of folks are getting out on bail, but when you are actually sentenced, are they longer, right? Are they going to be so in comparison to the sort of length of sentencing that one would have received prior to bail reform?
Absolutely.
Our prisons upstate, New York City is not sending as many bodies as they used to, and the economy's up there. Everyone in some towns only work in the prisons, right?
Thank you for acknowledging how much this is very much so a business, and that is the real incentive. A lot of what is the real incentive on mass incarceration and incarcerating so many poor Black and brown people is for that reason. Is to continue making money, and that's also something to think about and explore. I would say, I'm going to be 100% honest and say that I think bail reform absolutely does cause the people who they can set bail on to be harsher on 100%. The statistics show that people, when judges, and I experienced that in court, because they can't set bail on all these people that they wanted to, they're itching to, and that is the problem with all these people in our system being so punitive and carceral minded and just liking the ability to exercise authority over people, because it becomes clear that it's not about these individual people. It's not about what they did, what they're accused of, or anything like that. It's just about the ability to extend this power and to exercise this control and authority over people. So yes, they absolutely, I don't think it's sentencing that's impacted. I don't think they're sentencing people to longer time in terms of the actual sentencing on cases because of bail reform. I would say they are increasing the amount of bail and the amount of restrictions on the people that they can set bail on because of bail reform. I do believe that is true.
Okay, great. So, and now when we're talking about like sort of coalitions, I want to ask you a separate question about the victims, in your opinion, right? How can victims of crime, civil rights group, and community organizations effectively communicate their concerns and opinions about bail reform to legislators and policymakers?
I would say, I think an important note that people don't discuss enough is that most criminal justice reform advocates, most like victim survivors advocates, they are people who've experienced crime, right? Like abolitionist reform advocates, a lot of victim survivors are part of it. And also, important point to remember, victim survivors and victims advocates groups were very crucial to Chicago's Pretrial Fairness Act. It was 4 years of, conferring with them to get that passed. And same thing with New York City bail reform. So victims advocates in these groups. So important in terms of rearrest and crime. Bail is not, this is what's important. bail is not there to circumvent the criminal process, and it's too much of us talking about it like it is. Like, oh, these people, we live in a civil society where we say that there is a presumption of innocence. You are entitled to be convicted of something. We do not want to keep enabling and legitimizing a system where you are accused of something. That's it. It's hearsay. It's accused. You don't need any proof to get somebody arrested. You don't need proof of arraignments. You are accused of something. And now people say we need to have this system in place where, because of this cash bill, because you don't have money, I can incarcerate you, because otherwise I can't prove a case against you. And that's ultimately what it's about. Because if you can, most things in the criminal system are not going to go to trial. Most things are not going to end in the criminal convictions and everything you want in general, because they don't have that. Most people, you don't have the evidence, you don't have the wherewithal, we don't have that to proceed against people. So what we're saying is, let's have a system, let's enable a system where, because you're poor, I can incarcerate you and punish you, even though if I had to operate based on your constitutional right, I couldn't do it. So that's first of all. Second is, most things, first of all, most things in our criminal system in New York, period, are misdemeanors. They're misdemeanors, traffic offenses, or nonviolent crimes. But of bail reform, since bail reform has been passed, less than 2% of people have been rearrested for any violent crime or felony, period. So there's that. There's also a level of playing up something that's just not the larger problem and issue that we have here. But importantly, in terms of victims and victims' rights and victims' thoughts, I put out an essay yesterday about my experience with domestic violence, because people assume when they turn abolitionists, if you say I believe that the criminal system should be abolished or the prison should be abolished, if you experience violent crime, you wouldn't feel that way. I have. And it doesn't, there comes a time when you recognize that condemning something doesn't prevent its reoccurrence, right? Like, I could condemn violence till I'm blue in the face. That doesn't prevent it from reoccurring. Like, punishing somebody is not going to change the harm I've experienced. It's not going to make me whole. It's not going to make them whole. And it's not going to do anything to prevent our society from experiencing this again. So I'd say, one, victims we do empower. There's no laws. None of these bail reforms or anything happens without victims, advocates, and survivors having they have a seat at the table. They have a major seat at the table in terms of organizing these laws. I'd say, second, we have to recognize that a lot of these things that we typically address as concerns and what the media discusses is not reflective of the reality of the numbers of what happens in our criminal system or what bail is meant there to do. And I would say, three, we have to have an assessment. It's not just about your feelings and your harm and all these different things, but also trying to look to what is better for the collective. How can we best address this? How can I best participate in a system where this harm doesn't occur? Not just that I'm condemning this person for this harm afterwards, but where it doesn't reoccur. So what is the problem with this person? What are the issues? What are the different things, the circumstances that exist in these scenarios that are allowing this to happen? And how can we address that? So that's my answer.
Okay. Yep. Again, good answer. And so last two questions, which are local politics, but at the state level, right? Yeah.
Okay.
The governor's nominee was rejected.
Yes. Yeah, we love it. We love to see it.
And so what do you see? Like, how do you see this rejection impacting the governor's political standing? And the national perception, right? Because again, the red wave occurred in New York.
Yes. I think and I wish I could be a fly on the wall so I can understand what other dynamics are at play that we don't know about. Because honestly, it doesn't really make much sense to me that she is expending so much political capital on this. Like, I understand it would be different if, again, it was just me upset. The radical lefties is no. I see the entire party came out, every Democratic state senator, every council member, everybody came out as opposing this choice.
Oh, and no, not everyone.
Oh, well,
the machine,
the main one.
Yeah, so the Democratic, they're definitely separated.
They go for the foolishness. I see Hakeem in them. I'm gonna let him live. I'm the best I can do for him. The best I can do for him is to not comment. But we did have a comment, right? Stay out of that, right? Yeah, Washington and my thing is, I'm like, listen, this is New York City. At the end of the day, you're a person who narrowly won. You narrowly won, and you only really won because, like I said, all the AOCs and these people came out at the ninth hour and tried to drive it home for you. And a lot of
I did too. Like,
yes.
When I got
yes, 100%. Same, Kwanda, same. I'm like, listen, I had to come out. I had to come and make a few videos, a few this, and me mention this in the Breakfast Club. Let's talk about it. Like, you know what I mean? I'm like, which can make you feel a little bit frustrated when you feel like, okay, we're the people. I'm championing, bail from all these different things, trying to make people aware of what the stats are and these things that could help you. And they don't, you know what I mean? They don't lean into it. They don't acknowledge it. They instead lean into all these like negative framings and messagings and fearmongering and all these different things that harm them. And then you come out, you have no choice but to come out and try and save them from themselves because you don't want to Zeldin. And the first thing they do is this.
Same thing with Adams. Like you only have Sliwa. Like there are 8 other mayoral candidates on the ballot. What do you mean?
Saying
Option is. I'm like, I hear so much about like the open AI. I said, does anyone realize how smart this city would have been right now if you had elected me? And like you're raving about that. I said that was in my plan, that the chat box that y'all are talking about to make sure we get some accurate information about how to navigate New York City. I was talking about that 2 years ago.
Then they'd be mad, child. They'd be mad. But I think I think it's a mistake. I think it's a mistake for her to have leaned into it as much. I think what she should do now, but I don't think she is doing it because my friend called me last night giddy about it not. and then being like, why is she still trying to do it? And I'm like, he was like, he must have something on her. What does this judge have on her? Like, but I think she should just let it go. Honestly, to some level, the media and messaging and news and everything moves so fast, change so fast. By the time it's relevant to her, if she just lets this go, just let it go where it's supposed to go. Just let it go. Don't mention it no more. By the time it's relevant, we won't even. That's her best move. This is something. I think that this is a bad move just all across the board because the Saul that appointee. It's not just like, oh, you're anti-union, you're anti-choice, you're from a prosecutor. Like, sweetie, you're covering all the bases. You're covering all the bases for bad talking points about yourself. She should just leave that alone. That's a bad
and my last question, because this has been great, right? Speaking of, from your perspective, how does she justify the need for her nomination to go to the floor despite being rejected? And is trying to push the process through, stating that there's a constitutional requirement for him to receive a floor vote. Like, what do you think? Again, because she's still fighting this. It died in the committee, and
I'm telling you, my friend truly believe I'm gonna lean out of conspiracy theories, but I'm just gonna throw it there that my friends didn't believe that man got something on because my logical brain isn't making it make sense for me. I can only imagine because on one hand, you want to say maybe she's just trying to flex. You know what I mean? Like show like, oh, this is my choice. I'm the governor. She feels like she came out. Maybe she feels like she jumped out the window with this, so she feels like she has to, really push it. Maybe that's that. So I think to me, 2 things. I think there's some underlying motivation that we don't know about, that we are not privy to as to why she's pushing this guy as much as he is. I think the second fold of that is how does she go about justifying it? I don't think there is any actual justification. If I were a white woman such as her, how I would justify it, I would girl boss this up. I would say, I wouldn't go for it, but I'm saying for other people, for her, if I'm a white lady and I'm going to go appeal to other white people, I would probably be like, I'm the first female governor. I put out this choice, and immediately, everybody.
The first Hispanic
ever.
Yes,
I would forget that because they've lost at that point. All of a sudden, all Gustavo Riviera, all our good Latino politicians that come out and say no, not him. So she can't even do that. But what I would say is that the reason why I would paint it as though it's happening because I'm a woman, that far more problematic choices and things like this happened when I was, deputy, even though she probably shouldn't allude to that because that people think she's moving very Cuomo veined. But maybe it's like, as a woman, when I saw Cuomo as governor, they didn't treat him like this. There wasn't this kind of concerted, united pushback on my choices and blah, 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 blah. But I'm experiencing this because I am the first woman governor. So in order to get my respect or to show these people that I'm serious, whatever it is, I have to push it. I can't just let it go. Because if they see that I roll over once, I'll roll over forever. That would be the argument I would make if I were her. That would be how I would go about messaging it. Okay. I don't believe it, but I'd do it if I was her. I think it's a good point.
Okay, but that follow-up, right? Is there any law? Is there a constitutional requirement that is there an angle for her to still push this nominee through
I don't believe there is. I don't believe there is, but I don't know off the top of the dome. I would have to check and be sure. I can't say with 100% certainty. I will say with the law in general is that if you want to do something and enough powers that be, the law is about interpretation, right? Like how you spin it. So I'm sure it can be spun to do what the governor wants to do to some degree. I just don't think she should be bothered.
Got it. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining the show. This was an incredible conversation.
Thank you, Kwanda. Thank you for having me.